Greetings, and good evening. Welcome, 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 welcome. I am going to, let's see here. I have a song. I wish it was my song, but it's by DJ Khalid. And it says, All I Do Is When. I really, really like that because that's what we're doing today. You could go to Granger.com to find what you need to get the job done. Granger, supplies and solutions for every industry. Here we go. I need to see if I can get that built in. Yes. Yes, get it. Go Court. Yes. We are going up. Yes, welcome, welcome, welcome to Winning Workplace Wednesdays. It is your coach, executive coach, that is. Shout out to one of the most admired CEOs in Minneapolis, Mr. Ryan Daniel. Spoke to that client today. I'm just so excited to have my guest of honor, Miss Courtney Malengo, who is the founder of Sparkle and Buzz Communication. Welcome, welcome, Courtney.
Thank you, Tish, for having me. I'm so happy to be here tonight chatting with you.
Yes, yes. You absolutely have to open up with who you are, who is Courtney, and how you got into the epiphany of birthing your own organization.
Well, I will try to give you, I guess, the most like nutshell and succinct version of that. But I think the story goes a little something like this. I started my career in journalism, and for a long time, I thought that I wanted to, be an editor on a magazine. That maybe someday I might move to New York and like I'd climb my way up, the proverbial editorial ladder and do something like that. And I think pretty quickly after college, I sort of realized like that might not be the total journey for me, but I did go to work for a trade association and I started on their magazine. And then I started doing a lot of freelance work after that, where I was writing human interest stories for a variety of regional magazines. So Maryland Life, Frederick Magazine, Bethesda Magazine. And, I realized that one of the things I enjoyed about sort of the broader human interest pieces or, arts and entertainment things is that I could have a more longer format and, I could really get to know my subject or topic. It wasn't just a news story where you had to crunch in the who, what, when, where, why in this, tiny little kind of section. And so I think that was sort of some of my first inkling, really on the trail of storytelling. But when I looked kind of at my life's, career work, so to speak, I mean, I had worked in nonprofit world, trade associations, faith-based organizations, and more recently, senior living and healthcare, done real estate. So I'd kind of been all over the map, but the one constant was really always how I helped, individuals and organizations tell their story and use that as a way to grow. And, as a kid, I definitely had a lot of entrepreneurial tendencies. I didn't always recognize it as that, but my dad was an entrepreneur, and so I kind of learned a little bit of the good and bad, from him, seeing what he did really well, but also seeing some of the mistakes he made. And I had a lemonade stand. I did with a lot of kids too. It was my first really great lesson in location, because the only customer I had was the postman. I grew up in rural Montgomery County, and so I lived in this road where there was hardly any traffic. And so as a kid, right, I didn't think about that. I wasn't thinking like, oh, there's not enough cars that are going to come by, to purchase lemonade. I'm just like, hey, I'm going to sell lemonade and cookies. So the postman was my only customer, but I learned a really important lesson about that, right? And like in real estate, location is everything.
Yes.
And so, I, even as a kid in elementary school, I sold friendship bracelets. And then kind of like later on, I can remember kind of my first marketing lesson, aside from the location issue, was I wanted to do babysitting. And so I decided to make my own flyers. And then I had my mom copy them, like take us to, I don't think it was called Kinko's at the time, but whatever it was, right, to copy all these flyers. Then she drove me around the neighborhood so I could stuff the
Mm,
mailboxes. So,
nice.
I was always looking for ways that, I could make a difference, that I could do something I was interested in. And all of that sort of, entrepreneurial bent, like it followed me in my career. I'd say in a lot of ways, I was an entrepreneur because I was often in roles that had not existed before within organizations, or
Mhm,
I was charged with starting something new. And, I continued to do side hustles and different things to kind of keep me interested. But ultimately, all that collided about 5 years ago for me. So it was like when I looked at my professional career trajectory, and then when I looked at some of these inklings of, how I had enjoyed different parts of trying to be an entrepreneur, and I knew I always wanted to work for myself. I just was not sure how I was going to make that happen. I mean, I was working like a 50, 60-hour work week sometimes.
mhm.
That's kind of impossible in a lot of ways to, do that on the side. So really the birth of my son was kind of the culmination of me turning that corner because right, I didn't want to pick, like, I didn't want to have to choose between him and my professional passion. And women, no matter what choice they make, they're criticized about it. And so, I thought, well, if there's a way I can like mesh these two worlds together and make it work, like that's kind of what I want to do. And God really just opened up the doors for me to start my own consultancy with Spark and Buzz, and my former employer became my first client. And so
And
it really just, I could not have orchestrated that myself. It all just really worked out great. And that was kind of my launch pad for, where I am now. So much of what I do now, I did in house for other companies and other executives and other people. But this was just a really great opportunity for me to branch out on my own and, finally kind of chart my own course.
that's amazing. I am so glad that your son was birthed and you had that opportunity to step out. And more importantly, your son is number one. In addition to the birth of your son, that you were such a phenomenal employee that your employer was like, "Oh no, where are you going? You can't go too far. We are going to patronize your services." Way to go on just being a superstar that they just couldn't get enough to share you with anyone else. They had to have you first. So that's phenomenal. Way to go.
You.
But I love the name. I love the name Sparkle and Buzz. How did you come up with the name?
Yeah, so it's funny, not everyone asks about that, but Spark and Buzz really originated because, first off, I like the way words sound. So, I've always been kind of a wordsmith. When I
Yes.
was in college, I was a little bit of a geek because I used to have a word wall. And I would, look at words all the time and kind of rotate them. But I like how words sound, so that's one reason. But the other is that I really do believe that sometimes you need a spark, right? A spark to ignite change, a spark to ignite new ideas, a spark to create a movement. And I believe that that's kind of my role in life, is to help be that spark to come up with those ideas or to challenge maybe the status quo. And so you need a spark to get the buzz that you deserve.
I love it. I love the connection. And so, with Spark to get started and the buzz to let people know, I also, I think we talked about that when we first connected in terms of, the Shine Institute, shine on, words. I too am very intentional with the verbiage that I choose when I'm writing for Forbes, when I am just speaking or sending an email, that it's deliberate and hopefully the other person can catch it and they can feel that energy in the other end. So when I hear the word spark, I think of sparkle. And so today I wore my
I
sequin
like
jacket. And
it.
so
I like
what
it.
are some sparkly ways that you have helped, whether it's your first client or some of your clients, to spark and think about culture?
Yeah, so I mean, culture is not a new topic, but I think it's certainly kind of a hot button issue right now, especially with all the remote work and many employers recanting on their promise of, hey, we're not going to make you come back in.
Yeah.
I think that, for me, a lot of that has been in those moments of, so not only when I worked for, former employers, but then also on my own. in having those one-on-one conversations with the CEO or with the VPs or, a director of HR, really to say, sometimes the problems that they believe that they have, the reason for those problems are not always exactly what they think they are. And, the higher up the ladder you climb in an organization, the more removed you are from the day-to-day of what's going on. And simultaneously, you also have access to way more information than other employees do. And oftentimes, not for malicious intent, but executives forget that, right? They forget that all these things that they're thinking about that the rest of the team doesn't yet know. And so what that results in is less communication, less intentional communication, and then an assumption of, I may have
Assumptions.
said
Woo.
this, I may have said this once, or, we shared it at town hall last month, but, saying it once or doing it once is not enough for it to stick with somebody. And so I think a lot of my focus is really around, number one, how can you create a positive, good culture that is woven with a story, right? How do you use a story to share the best parts of, your values, your belief system, really the soul of your organization, and use that not only for internal culture, but also for marketing, for every department that you have, because employees want to know why you do what you do. It's not just about the thing you're producing or, the widget that you're stamping, right? That there's a deeper meaning. I mean, Starbucks does not sell coffee. They sell community, right? Or
An
NASA,
experience.
right? It's all about an experience. NASA is like another great example of this, because I'm sure you may have heard this adage, right? But employees were trained at NASA, even down to a housekeeper or a secretary or anything like that. If someone asked them what they did and what their kind of mission was, it was, I'm here to put a man on the moon. It wasn't like, I'm a housekeeper, I'm a secretary. That tells you something about their culture, about how they see the organization, how they see themselves, but how they see themselves contributing to that greater mission. And so my focus is always, how can I help teams communicate better, improve their communication, and recognize those blind spots and be honest about the role that they might be playing in that situation, right? Because sometimes you just need someone else that's not internal to hold up that mirror and say,
Yep.
have you thought about how that might come across, right? You might think it's this, but there's other people who are saying, oh, well, when you do that, you come across really standoffish, or I was offended, by X, or this happened. It's just, there's so many perceptions and things going on, and no one's perfect, but that's generally
Absolutely.
how I try to approach kind of the culture issue or the culture topic, because I think it is all about, what do you live, eat, and breathe? And everything comes down to, do you say, what you say, do you do that, right? Do you practice what you preach? You
Mhm.
can have the best mission statement on the wall. You
Yes.
can have the best, like, rah, we're great because of X, Y, and Z. But if you don't practice what you preach, your
Mhm.
employees know it, your customers know it. And there's a huge chasm in there from an experience standpoint, but also you're missing out, right? You're missing out on additional ROI. You're missing out on an enhanced culture. That's just, it's not, I think about it in the fact that it's not all of these, everyone looks at these like, oh, it's the little details, right? It's these little things that don't matter. But actually, when you start to understand that a brand is not a slogan, a tagline, all these things that are visual parts of a brand, but your brand is ultimately every single touch point that
Yeah.
someone has with your organization, the experience that creates. it's
Mhm.
it's a culmination of all those touch points and experiences that ends up defining your brand. And when you think about it like that, then you're definitely going to care about how employees answer the phone, how do they undersign their email,
Yeah.
how are housekeepers like folding towels, right? Like whatever it is, all of a sudden that little detail really does matter.
You hit something, and It's so true because the higher up you go, you have so many. I just remember having so many meetings like, oh, where am I going to squeeze in lunch? It's just like, okay, I have this call, I have this call, I have this call. We're opening this. Okay. But the boots on the ground, the front liners, Courtney,
Yes.
they have so much information. And so for me, when I'm helping my clients with culture, it's very critical. Winning Workplace Wednesdays is not only here online, but it's something that I recommend to the CEO, it's something that I recommend to the C-suite, to the leadership team. Hey, do you know your people?
Right.
Do you know them? Do they like you? Or do you
Yeah.
just show up for the town halls and then you disappear for another month? Like
Right.
they have a voice. And when you empower that, you can have the
Yeah.
next aha idea. Not only we're putting someone on the moon, we're putting them on Mars. There's
That's right.
just so many solutions there. Like, man, if management can only do this, this, and this, we wouldn't have this problem. But when we
Right.
don't take the time to allow them to say, and not only once, I'm a big proponent of the quarterly pulse surveys, or like Hilton. I just have to continue to sing Hilton's praises with their Blue Energy Committee. It's 60% made up of frontliners from the housekeeper to supervisor, middle level management, and then you have some other senior leaders on there as well, so that we can hear what's happening, because we're not always in the nitty gritty, the corners, seeing everything.
That's right. I mean, I think, I think that's a great way to sort of encapsulate it is that, I always tell executives like they kind of need to go on walkabout. That's what I
Yeah.
call it. Is like if you're out amongst the team, amongst the front
Mhm.
line, if look, your job as the leader, as the CEO is not to micromanage everything. It's not that everything has to be on your back. The best thing that you can do for the organization is to be out of your office and among your people, because
Yes.
when you are, then you hear all those things that normally you don't.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
other people, like, so the rest of the executive team sometimes, and this is another area that sometimes I think CEOs get tripped up on, is, a lot of times executive teams or boards, right, they can turn into yes people. I don't want to rock the boat, or I want to be the most,
Yes.
favorite. It's kind of like sometimes a weird dysfunctional family where it's like you want to be the favored child. So, people will withhold information from the
Yes,
CEO
yes,
purposefully because they're worried that that makes them look bad, or it's like they don't want to acknowledge that, or they don't want to challenge, right?
yeah.
So you get into this kind of group think situation, and then people aren't being honest. Whereas I always felt like, not everyone appreciated this, but I always felt like my role is to be honest with you, that you
Yes.
can't improve and do better if you don't know. And if
Right.
everyone else is going to tell you it's fine, I'm
Shame
not
on
going to,
them. Shame on them.
right.
Shame
I'm
on them.
not going to tell you that, because guess what? It is not about all these other people, and it
Yes.
shouldn't be about our own personal agendas. It needs to be
Yeah.
about what's in the best interest of the organization and
Correct.
what's in the best interest of the people that work there and the customers we serve. And how do we do our best to do right by all those audiences when we
Yes.
can? And when we can't, then how do we communicate that to people?
Yes. Yes. Oh, Courtney, I know that we have set questions, but as you said that on Monday, Forbes had it was hosted in London. I forgot the name of the consulting firm, but they had a webinar on psychological safety. And one of the individuals asked a question. It was just talking about perhaps if we linked up with them, they can show us how to measure psychological safety. Because if you measure it, then you're going to see where you need to grow and where you need to improve. And someone asked a question. I mean, there were so many questions about, not individuals in the C-suite, not necessarily walking the walk and that group think. And, what do you do? So the question that the person asked was, I've been to several organizations and I know this is an important topic, but it seems to continue to be a reoccurring issue for mental health and being safe and just being yourself and asking the question that everybody's thinking, but nobody has the courage to ask.
Yeah.
Why is that? And we just went back to, making sure that the values that the organization shares with the branding, that they're walking in, that it's true, and that it's a reflection of you, and that you're able to, you shouldn't think or have that pressure. Will my peers like me? Will I be invited to the happy hour or the coffee or the water cooler? Let's get some water, because I'm asking the questions that everybody's asking and no one has the courage to ask. I mean, it's just so interesting. And that starting in the C-suite, the leaders, it trickles down and it makes the culture very much one where individuals just want to come and have a job and let it be a pit stop,
Yeah.
and not a luxury liner where they are cruising for years.
Right. They're not gonna, when people don't feel like they can be their best self at work and that they can trust the people around them, they are not going to go above and beyond for you. That is just the reality. That is only forged, out of loyalty, right? Like that you guys have kind of gone through the crucible together and you've been through some
Yeah,
stuff and you've built trust, right? You've built
correct.
some loyalty to the organization or to that boss or that person. And I think that, unfortunately, because of just all of us being human and flawed, right? There's never going to be 100% psychological safety anywhere.
Of
I
course.
also think sometimes we all get in our own feelings a little bit too much. Like feelings are not fact. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't pay attention to them, but you got to ask yourself, why am I feeling that way? And I think if you can, really peel back the layers, we can't blame other people for how we feel because we're still responsible, ultimately for how we react. And
Absolutely.
so I think we have to ask, just kind of go through that, right? Like, why am I feeling this way? Like, is it because of a past experience, right? Is it because of something specific that this person said to me? Is it because of something specific that they did, or and maybe they did it unintentionally, or in some cases it is intentional. Like, don't get me wrong, there is workplace aggression
Yes, yes, yes.
so sometimes it is, but I think, the more we can all kind of look to say, all right, like, what's my part? It's never just one person. It is never just one
Absolutely.
person, right? What
Absolutely.
has been my role in this? And have I tried to do my best to kind of communicate and work through that? And I think, if teams don't trust each other, and that does start kind of at the executive level, it filters throughout the organization. And I've worked in some places where there's great bonds and people will hang out with each other outside of work. And then
Mhm.
I've worked in other places where, on the surface, it's like we say we trust each other. We all show up at a meeting. We all agree on something. And then you know what? After that meeting,
There's a
there's like
meeting.
a million, right? There's a million other little mini meetings. And
Yes,
so
yes,
everything you just said in that room, you've completely undone like behind the scenes
yes.
because you weren't being genuine. You were being duplicitous because you would go back and then you would work with other people on the team, right? Like the manipulation. So if there's
Yes.
that kind of environment, people are not, they're not going to share things. They're not going to rock the boat. And because sometimes that's all based out of, it's a fear-based response. But
Yes.
frankly, there's also people who are not strong enough always to stick up for themselves. And
Correct.
so you have to have other people who are willing
That's
to
right.
stick their neck out for the
Have
rest
that
of the group.
integrity. This is not right. You
Yeah.
know, two things I want to share. I want to shout out Indeed. Um, I spoke with a representative from Indeed, and I was like, "Hey, I was trying to get in touch with you on Friday. Where were you?" And he said, Indeed has a mental health day every month. I thought that was phenomenal. I thought
That's
that
awesome.
was phenomenal. And then I went to a diversity, equity, and inclusion conference, and I was, I really love the fact, like you said, someone may not have the courage to say, "Hey, I am a little insecure, that hurt my feelings," or whatever the case is. But having the question, based on these decisions, based on what we're going to do, who is going to lose? How do
Right.
you feel about that? Is there anything we can do to preserve it?
Right.
Or who are we not allowing to have a voice? Having that question at the table before you finalize the decision is so critical. It's
Yeah.
so, so critical.
No, I agree.
Let me be a good steward to make sure that I capture the questions that I wanted. So last month I interviewed Nicole Hassania at HD Enterprises, and she of course recommended for us to connect with the spark,
Yeah.
the shine. From your perspective, what have you found most rewarding about being an entrepreneur?
I think it's the freedom, the freedom it really is priceless. A lot of people will ask me, like, wow, I can't believe you went out on your own, or I'd be too afraid to do that. And it's not that entrepreneurs don't have fear. I mean, I like to say that the journey is equally thrilling and terrifying at
Yes,
the same time.
yes, yes,
Um,
yes, yes.
but when you work so hard for other people,
Mhm.
and I never really fully felt like I was appreciated. I mean, that was kind of always a thing. It's like I would kind of go to the ends of the earth for you,
Yes,
and I
yes,
wanted that in return. I wanted some level of that reciprocated to me. And in some cases, it was, but never really to the level that I wanted. And I'm also not a like, hey, look at me. I need to
yes. I
be
don't
the
think that's
center of
necessary because if you're doing it, you should say, "Hey, oh my gosh, Court, what a killer campaigner! You did
right.
such a
Right.
phenomenal job."
But sometimes I think, to go back to like people's egos or issues, right?
Oh my
That shows up in those areas too. Or,
goodness.
I've worked places where, I mean, and I'll give you a verbatim quote of what someone told me one time. They were like, well, we can't recognize this person for the good job that they did. And I said, well, why can't you do that? Well, because it's going to make everybody else on the team upset. I was like,
Why? Did
wait,
they
what?
explain why?
Because everyone else on the team is like subpar.
Oh,
So
no.
what they were doing was like their
Reinforcing
shining,
mediocrity.
yes, their shining star. They wanted to dim her light because she made other people feel uncomfortable, and she made other people feel like she's going to make us work harder. Like we're going to be held to a higher expectation. It's like, no, she's doing those things because it's genuine from her heart.
Okay.
It's how she is, it's how she serves. And that should be the
The
gold standard in
standard.
the organization. And you guys don't want to ruffle the feathers of the crappy people on the team. Like, are you
Oh my God.
kidding me? Like, that is so
Yes.
backwards. But that kind of stuff happens all the time.
All
And
the
so I
time.
when you get out of the like I don't have to deal with like the politics and all the
Yeah.
other stuff the same
Mhm.
way I did, when I worked internally. So
Mhm.
I think for me, that freedom to dictate my own schedule, to have spent time with my son while he's
Yeah.
young, and it's precious time that I would never have gotten back.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's really about that. I can work on the things that I want to work on. I can partner with the clients that I want to partner with. And,
Yes, you get to
I don't have to work with,
choose.
if you're a jerk, I can be like, hey,
It's
I
not
don't
a
think we're a
fit.
good fit. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. I love it. Freedom. I mean, there's nothing like it. There, like you said, it's just very, very refreshing to have that. Looking back on your career, what is one thing you've learned that you would tell the graduating class of 2023? Let's look at the undergraduate. They're just coming out. Some have student loans, some have their first jobs. What would be some feedback?
I mean, I think I would say, to believe in yourself, even when other people don't,
Mhm.
and to not be afraid of the hard things. There are going to be times in life where you're tried, you're tested, and life's hard.
Yes.
If you take the easy road, it is not going to make you happy. It might seem that way temporarily, but
Mhm.
it's not going to lead you to anything great. And it's also not going to lead to situations that create character. And ultimately, at the end of the day, regardless of what profession you pursue, how much money you make,
Mhm.
your character and your integrity are the hallmarks of what speak for themselves. And people will know you by
Absolutely.
those things. And so when you can become a person who, kind of has that grit about them, right? That I'm plucky, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep pushing through that. Like, it doesn't matter what the circumstance looks like. Don't take the easy way out, like bear it and like get into it. It's okay.
Mhm.
It's not going to be hard forever.
Right, that's right.
But don't shy away from that, because I think things that are hard are the things that are really truly worthwhile in doing. And I'm not talking about situations where somebody or something is intentionally making something hard or difficult for you. I'm talking just about life scenarios that
Mhm.
require work, and they require
Absolutely.
time and attention to really get that result.
I concur. I would like to shout out my sister. This past Friday, I attended her retirement celebration for 20 years in the
Awesome.
US Air Force, Courtney.
That's
And I just
awesome.
remember her journey was a journey. So at 38, she's retired. She
That's
started
awesome.
at 18. She's now a wife and a mother of four. And I had so many tears just listening to the stories of her wanting to give up in her 16th year. And they're like, girl, you just have 4 more years. Keep
Right.
pushing. So I would concur on that advice. The things that are worth having, it's gonna, you may skid a knee, but you just got to continue to persevere, because don't settle in the middle. That's where you get the word mediocre. You want to go all the way to the paramount, all the way to the top. Good stuff. Good stuff. Okay. My next question is, let's see, can you share an experience when you assisted a client with exceeding a goal or a set of goals?
Yeah, I mean, I think too, I've had a lot of great experiences with clients. So I mean, I'm happy to say that sometimes it's hard
That's
to kind of pick
excellent.
what I want to highlight. But I think there's two that, one's recent and one's kind of, from a long time ago. But I had one where a client was in a very serious, crisis communications problem, a huge PR problem that was like all over the news.
Mm,
And we were able to make that go away in 24 hours because of how on top of it we were, and coaching the CEO on, look, these are the things that you need to be saying. These, you need to get out in front of the reporters. Like, you can't ignore the media. We have to be prompt with our response. And so because we did that, you know, everything died down in 24 hours. That's not normal, typically, right? Because especially if you ignore it, it just kind of keeps continuing
Festers,
to go.
yeah. Mhm.
So I was, it was a tough situation, but I was also really happy that we were able to help, restore some sanity and balance to kind of what was going on at that time. And then recently, I had the opportunity to really help promote an art show that was benefiting Ukrainian refugees. And so, I think the team, we were kind of like, hey, it'd be great if we had, I don't know, a couple hundred people come through the exhibit, if we sell some of the artwork, because any of the artwork sold goes directly to benefiting Ukrainian refugees. And so, I kind of had a different personal goal. I was like, well, I didn't tell them this, but I was like, I really want to see like at least like 20 pieces of artwork sold.
Yes.
So
Mhm.
we ended up, like the last count I heard was like 26. It's probably gonna be closer to 30 pieces of artwork sold. And we, doubled, almost tripled kind of our minimum attendance. We were thousands
Wow.
of people coming out. So I think it's stuff like that, that when you can say, you never know. I mean, look, you can put the best work into something, but there are no guarantees, right? I can't tell a client I'm going to guarantee you 50% ROI, right? An increase in ROI, or I'm going to guarantee you 5,000 people will show up to this event. But
Right.
you have to put in like the legwork to do all those things, and then hope that all of those things that you're doing, right, are coming together. They work together to
Yes.
create a positive outcome. And so
Mhm.
in those scenarios, they did not every scenario turns out like that.
Mhm.
But I'm fortunate that I've not had, a lot of like major like flops where it's like, wow, we just didn't do anything. It's just, we
Mhm.
may have to adjust expectation, but it's like, why not shoot for the moon? That's like always my philosophy,
Yes,
right? Like, let's
absolutely.
shoot for the moon and see what happens. And if we don't make it to the moon, that's okay,
Mhm.
but it's like, did we get pretty close? Or, I mean, just, I'd always rather shoot higher than say like,
I
just
agree.
as
Scale
low.
it down, you know? Yeah, wow. I would love to learn more about, we were talking about this on Sunday, just how long the war has been. So please, I mean, however, others can contribute and donate. That would just be phenomenal. Can we learn more on your website?
Yeah, actually, I don't know if I have a bunch of this on the website yet. I'll have a like kind of case study up on it. But it was a traveling art exhibit, and it has since left. So it debuted in Maryland about 2.5 months ago.
Mhm.
So it's no longer here. But this art exhibit travels kind of around the country, and the artist, her name is Ludmila Paloska.
Ludmila, is she from? I have a friend named Ludmila.
So
She's from
she's been involved.
Curacao.
She has a very interesting background and story, and I actually had the chance to interview her, so I learned a lot about her. But she was really kind of a like a child, art prodigy, and she
Mm,
was born in Kazakhstan, and then pretty much like raised in the Soviet Union.
mm,
She did a lot of her art and schooling in Moscow. So she had always wanted to, I think, get out of the Soviet Union, get out of then Russia, right? And she eventually was able to do that. Her mother and father both had Ukrainian roots. Her mom lived in the Ukraine for a long time, and so she ends up getting married, moves to Sweden, and her mom finally gets to come visit her. And on her mom's first visit, she's there for maybe a week or two and has a sudden stroke and passes away.
no.
That singular event is really what created this art exhibit called Icons and Transformation. And so she drew a lot of not only inspiration from her mother, but frankly, the grief that she went through, she used her paintbrushes to work out that grief. And so
Wow.
because her family comes from a line of people who fought against Russian oppression and aggression,
Mm,
she just she is pro democracy, pro wanting to stick up for the people in Ukraine. They still
yes.
have family and they know people there. And she's been very pivotal in helping refugees like relocate to Sweden and then go on to other places.
Mhm.
So for her, it kind of, she's done this exhibit for, gosh, I guess about 26 years. But in the past couple of years since the war started, she's really been donating all of her proceeds, to that. So I'd say, if you Google her, you can go check out her website. If I know she's going to be in Fort Wayne, Indiana, in I think late or in early July or something like that for a couple
Mhm.
months. So if you Google her, you can check out her website. And I'm sure like if you really wanted to purchase some of the artwork, you could get in touch with her, directly. But all of that is benefiting refugees. So it's just a really cool story. Not only of kind of her family lineage and heritage, but just this heritage of standing up against, Russian oppression. And I think that's the hallmark of, the Ukrainian people right now, really.
Yeah, wow, that's deep. How powerful. I'm so proud of her
Yeah.
for, taking her grief and not allowing it to drunken her, but to just continue to persevere. And I'm sure those pieces are beautiful, you
They
know?
are. She specializes in more like the expressionist and abstract kind of,
Mhm.
paintings. But she does what she kind of calls three-dimensional painting. So it's a unique medium that she utilizes. But there are themes of faith and spirituality and love and time, kind of in all her pieces. And I think it's hard not to see them and be kind of transported into, her eyes, right? How she was experiencing something at that time.
Mhm. What are you most proud of?
Oh, I would probably say, I mean, I feel like that's kind of a tough question. I would narrow it down to two things. I would say, starting my own business, it was something I always wanted to do. So I'm really proud that I can, kind of mark that off my bucket list.
Mhm.
But also my son, one never knows like how many kids they're going to end up having or kind of what that journey will look like.
Mhm.
But I am thrilled that to have him around, and he's just a special kid. He's brought so much joy into our life. So I'd have to say my business and my son.
That's amazing. How old is your son?
He's 5.5. He'll turn
Wow.
6 on Christmas Eve.
What a wonderful birthday, double gifts.
Does, yes. And we make sure that we do not wrap birthday gifts in Christmas paper.
Yes, you cannot double dip, mama. You
No,
cannot double
no,
dip.
you cannot. No, you cannot.
When you're not serving as mommy and wife, how do you celebrate yourself?
I think probably my favorite things to do when I can, and I usually carve out time at least like once a year for a girls' trip. Just like the girlfriends, like we get away, we go do something for a week. So I always do that, and then just going to get a massage, like that's kind of peak
Mhm.
relaxation for me. So if I can pair a massage, going to do some like wine tasting or bubbly tasting and anything with lavender, like all that is just
Mhm.
up my relaxation alley. Like that's where I'll be.
Nice. Do you have a favorite spot? I know there's a membership at Massage Envy. Father's Day is coming up. I may have to buy a couple gift cards, but I do appreciate massages. They're just,
Yes.
it's just like a restart, right?
It is. I mean, and I don't have a favorite spot. I think because we don't really like in this area kind of. I mean, we don't really have a lot of great spas. Like so I know Massage Envy, right? It's a chain.
Mhm.
I just have a thing about for relaxation, I don't want to go to someplace in a strip mall. And
Mhm.
I what I want is a place where, like if I can go to a remote location or if I can go to a cute, day spa that's in like a Victorian house or like
Mhm.
some just kind of unique setting, not a strip mall setting, which
Mhm.
a lot
Mhm.
of the stuff around here tends to be that strip mall setting because it feels like I'm going to an office, and I don't like that. So I really want that full experience.
Mhm.
So I don't have a favorite one here. I have been to, spas and lots of other places that I wish were here, but
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't have one here.
Got it. I've heard that the salamander, that I should definitely check that one out. So we'll see, which was formerly the Mandarin Oriental.
Yeah.
All right. And they said the Gaylord has a nice one too.
Yes, I should actually. That is yeah. I should check out the Gaylord. I've been down there, but not for the spa. So
I wonder if MGM, I'm taking a friend to dinner on Saturday night. The MGM, I wonder if the MGM has one because it's
yeah, I
pretty
don't know. That's a good
nice there
question. Yeah.
too. Hmm. Let's see here. I'm learning so much great stuff about you. Who is your superhero besides God, that is?
You know, this is kind of another tough question for me because I don't know. I don't ever really, to be honest, I don't think I've ever used the term like superhero to refer to anybody. So probably what I would say is like if I really had to like truly adhere to the definition of that word, I would say all mothers are superheroes.
Mhm, mhm.
But if I had to pick people that I admire,
That
I
you
would
call
definitely,
on.
yeah, that I would say, well, one is not living. So I would say someone who I admire that I think was very influential was C.S. Lewis.
Mhm,
And I studied C.S. Lewis a lot when I was in college. And, as a writer, just so many great things I thought that he did and the messages that he communicated and conveyed. But then also, I've been reading Bono's memoir from U2, and I have just
mhm,
discovered kind of a newfound respect for him. I've learned a lot of things about him I did not know, and I just think that he's doing a lot of soul searching and reflection about himself, and he's willing to he's willing to share where he's flawed and you
mhm,
don't see a ton of celebrities or people kind of in that category who are very willing to be vulnerable and kind of
mhm,
share like where they've screwed up and where they could do better and things like that. So I just have kind of a newfound respect for him.
mhm. I'm gonna check that out. I just pulled that up. Um, but C.S. Lewis, Courtney, you just dropped a bomb on that one. I mean, to come from an atheist to becoming a believer, what a transformation. I mean, some of his quotes are just priceless.
I mean, there's very, there are, when I think about the impact that he had, on not only Christianity, but literature itself. And J.R.R. Tolkien, they were best friends. I mean, I had the opportunity to be at the pub where they used to sit down and write, and,
Oh,
went to his house and walked in the woods where he used to walk. And I could just see, one of my favorite books of his is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And I could see parts of that story come to life in front of me in the woods as I was walking. Like these things that he mentions and references, some of them are in, the basically kind of like the backyard, the woods that he used to walk. And so, all of those things, as someone who was a writer, I mean, I still am a writer, but, really kind of my core of who I am started as a writer. It was just kind of an incredible thing to experience that. So I studied him when I was at Oxford, and like I said, got to tour all these places and sort of experience that for myself. And I think there aren't a lot of people today that I would say, are similar in that way. But what I liked about him is that, he shared from the heart, right? He shared from his own experience and his own journey. And, both him and Tolkien, the reason they ended up writing the things they did, which of course was informed by their own, faith journeys, but was also because at that time there were no stories being told that they really resonated with or felt like they saw themselves in. So they created the kinds of stories that they wanted to see. And those have lasted, the test of time for so many different generations. So
I mean, can you imagine? I mean, can you imagine having a cup of tea with him?
oh, I would love it. I'd be like, I need several cups of tea. Like, can we just hang out? Or, in his case, he was like probably like smoking the cigar and having his pint of beer, whatever, right? Like, if I can just sit there and hang out, great,
Yes, I mean, I'm very proud of him. He did well. He did well. So I look forward to that day when we all get together. Who knows? Maybe you'll be able to pick his brain.
Right, you never know.
Yes, yes. I love that. That was good. And thanks for sharing the book. I'm going to check it out. What is on the horizon for you? Your next project? What's the next exciting thing that you're working on that you would like to share?
I mean, I think there's a couple of things I've been working on. So, lately I've been doing it, there's always seasons sort of in business. And so lately I've been working on a lot more of, kind of how you tell your story through a website, right? So I have some clients where, we just launched a site for one. I'm working on another one that will hopefully launch in another, month and a half. And those are always, longer projects, right? Because it's not an overnight thing that a website kind of comes into being. Those have been, really rewarding and in different ways. I think the other thing that I'm really excited about, though, is, some of this hospitality training that I'm working with another client on. That, I've had the opportunity to kind of do a preliminary training with their leadership team, and they're really interested in, how do we create kind of a custom program that can really, set us apart. And what I've sort of been referring to that is how do you create really a culture of storied hospitality, right? That the kinds of experiences that you are delivering, that people want to tell stories about, that people want to talk about,
Yes.
because that is what everyone craves, right? Regardless of your age and background, you feel good when someone knows you, right? And they know what you like and they know how to serve you better. And
Yeah.
that always makes you feel special. It makes you feel cared for. It makes you feel like they paid attention to details. And so, I think that that's really kind of the next like hallmark of how companies are going to be successful. It's like we talk about it a lot, but most of the time that's reserved for hospitality sector, right, and the
Mhm.
customer service piece of that. But hospital systems have started to gravitate toward this over the past decade. I think that they are far from close to even mastering that on the hospital system side. But there's a push in healthcare, right, to create more hospitality. But
Absolutely.
that involves like you empowering teams to make decisions and to, delight your guests. That's the
Yes.
bottom line. Like in whatever way that is, you've got to create an experience for someone. And it doesn't always have to be big and grand gesture, right? It can be
Absolutely.
something small, but it needs to be meaningful, and you
Mhm.
have to do that intentionally. So it's about what are those things that we can do that are going to become those standards of our organization, and how we measure that.
As you shared that, it reminded me of one of my moments in hospitality, and I can just say hello to BF Soul Hospitality. And when I was there, I had a phenomenal boss, Miss Patricia Nadine Drew. She goes by Trish. And that book that Mr. Carrier recommended that we read was The Power of Moments by Chip and Dan Heath. And that book was good. It was so good to the point where when I bowed out, they created a special moment for me. From high school, you have your yearbook, everybody sign, and they created how I created a moment for the organization from day one until my last day, and just all of the pictures. And I mean, just I will never forget that,
Yeah,
and just how, when I am going about my journey of life, how can I create a moment, even if it's a little girl passing by, I ask her name and her age, and just to remember that she's beautiful and she's good
yeah,
enough.
yeah.
Just paying attention. You do not always have to have a title or a
That's right.
salon, to make someone's day.
That's right. A smile can do wonders. And, I tell people that really the most powerful people in an organization are not generally the CEO and the executive team. The most powerful people in the organization are the people who have sort of that human capital of others that will follow them, right?
That's
Wherever that is. They could be a housekeeper, it could
right.
be a midline manager, it could be someone
Mhm,
frontline. It doesn't matter. But if people respect them,
mhm.
they will be able to impact culture. And so it's not about your title. It's really about your behavior and how you treat other people.
I posted that on Instagram yesterday. The power of influence. That's where it's at. You may not be Oprah Winfrey with $1 billion, but do you have the influence to inspire someone, to encourage someone to make a different choice, to come alongside you and partner with you? And so I would have to concur on that for real, creating those moments. And I mean, when I worked at the Madison Hotel, individuals were there 40 plus years. I know it
Mhm.
was a union environment, but they were dedicated. And in every department, they didn't necessarily need a shop steward. There were leaders in each department. It was just something to see how they could run it without a manager,
Yeah,
because they owned it. They took pride in creating that moment.
that's
And
right.
so I wish we can all learn from that moment. Each day is a gift, and how can I make someone's day with that? And what is one thing you want our listening or our viewing audience to take away from today's interview?
I think probably the one big takeaway I would say, especially because, Spark and Buzz is a strategic communications consultancy. I mean, we focus on how you can tell your story to inspire audiences and galvanize growth. And in a literal way, we do that through, marketing and branding and public relations solutions. But I think the takeaway is, storytelling is a buzzword right now, but when you tell a story that is genuine and true, and
Mhm,
about, again, the why and the values of the organization or the
mhm,
person that is, telling the story, that you can reap a lot of benefits from that. And it's not going to be something that is a slick marketing campaign. I mean, that's happening a lot right now.
mhm,
But, if you actually use it for what I'll say, like the right reasons, you can yield just amazing benefits from that, right? Because when you look at having an overarching story, that the organization, it anchors the organization, it can enhance and communicate culture. It can also help you attract and retain employees,
mhm.
so you're creating, raving fans, repeat
Yeah,
customers,
yeah.
engaged employees. You're enhancing your ROI by doing all those things. And I have found that, few companies think about all these little things and connecting those dots. But when you do, there is no other competition that is going to be in your way, because when you can master all those things and really do that intentionally, it's not the work of that is not hard. The hard part is saying we want to do this and we all need to get aligned and strategic about how we're doing it, and intentional. It's just, you'll blow everybody else out of the water. And so I always encourage people to think about it like that, because if you start to understand, like we talked about earlier, that every experience, and interaction you have with someone, that ultimately defines your brand and who you are, then
Yes.
you'll think about those little details a lot more differently.
Definitely. The power of oneness. If an organization, whether it's marketing, human resources, finance, accounting, operations, if an organization can understand the power of oneness and they all, like you said from NASA, I am mopping the floor, but I'm sending someone to the moon. If
That's
everybody can
right.
get on one accord, just the power that they would have.
Yeah.
That
There is no stopping that. And I think, it takes work, but like we were talking about earlier, right? The hard stuff
Yep.
takes work. It takes
Yeah.
some time,
Yeah.
but the benefits are just innumerable in terms of, the positive outcomes that you can have, not only on your peers and the people you're working with, but whomever you're serving.
Yes, yes, and yes. I am going to allow you this was a nice, healthy hour. Man, time flies when you're having fun. I
Go.
would love for you to share with our viewers and our listeners, how can they stay connected if they wanted to hire you to help them tell their story and try to get that oneness within their organization? How can they hire Courtney?
Yeah, so you can reach out through my website, which is sparkandbuzz.com. You can also, follow me and reach out on Instagram, also Spark and Buzz, same handle. And you can look up Courtney Malengo on LinkedIn. It's actually Courtney Darby Malengo on LinkedIn. And, happy to kind of interact with you in any of those forums and talk more about how we can solve some of your communication challenges and create cohesive experiences.
Yes. Well, folks, I just want to let you know that Courtney is sassy. She wants to make sure that you start with a spark. It all starts with the spark. You don't have the rage and fire. You got to do your part to get that spark, and then it just buzzes throughout. So if you are looking to control the narrative, to make sure the PR is contained, to help everyone to understand the power of storytelling and getting everyone aligned. I mean, gosh, you heard some of her success stories. How powerful. Please give her a shout on IG, here on LinkedIn. She also, I think you mentioned you have a YouTube channel also.
I do, and I just started putting more like work samples and different things up there. So same thing, it's Spark and Buzz as well.
Yes, yes. I want to thank you so much for your time. I hope you felt that it was worth your time. And I hope that we can connect on some projects in the future. Until next time, folks, keep shining. Toodles.